Hello and welcome, everyone. So glad to have you here joining us today. My name is Pamela Lavitt. I am the Director of Arts and Ideas and Festivals at the Stroum Jewish Community Center. I am absolutely thrilled to have our guest today for Virtual Book Fest in Your Living Room, one of our virtual series, and this time with SNL legends, Laraine Newman, one of the original cast members and stars, Alan Zweibel, who has written so many books, and we are so excited to have him here. He is an Emmy-winning writer and one of the original writers for SNL. And obviously this conversation will be about a lot of their careers, and this was part of their careers and what they've done today. But the two of them have published amazing memoirs, which we will learn about. The moderator today is Warren Etheredge. For those of you who are joining us from the earlier community event, we are so excited that you are here joining us, and thank you so much for your support. I just wanted to let you know a few things that are coming up, and we're really excited that the 27th Annual Seattle Jewish Film Festival is going to be live as well as virtually this year, we hope. And that is taking place March 24th through April 10th. Also, this coming month, we are starting to play with a number of live events as well. It's been hard after 2 years. We're finally coming back online. But the True Colors performance, which is by The Braid, which is Jewish Women's Theater in Los Angeles, they are going to be performing True Colors, which is a play about Jews telling stories about community and identity. That is actually going to be on Zoom, and that is on February 6th, and tickets are still available. We hope that you will join us. So I just wanted to let you know that if you have questions during today's show, you can put them in the chat. We will have a chance for Q&A later. I also wanted to let you know that if you purchased books, and there are many of you that did, we will be mailing those books out later this week. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to boxoffice@sjcc.org. And also you can learn more about upcoming Arts and Ideas programs. We have comedians, world music, plays, film, all coming up within the next few months, some of it in our new live streaming theater studio. So we just installed live streaming, which is amazing. So live events can also be seen in person or at home. So without further ado, I just wanted to take a moment to welcome some amazing guests today for our virtual book fest. Laraine Newman, many of you know, is a founding member of the Groundlings and an original cast member of Saturday Night Live. She's worked for directors ranging from Woody Allen to Guillermo del Toro, and has written for the Jewish Journal, McSweeney's, Esquire, and The Believer. In her riveting new audio memoir, which you can find on audible.com, and it's free to subscribers, or you can purchase it, You May Live in Interesting Times, she chronicles her life growing up in Los Angeles with movie star neighbors, to joining the original cast of Saturday Night Live and working alongside John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, and Gilda Radner, among others, to her thriving current career working on animated favorites such as Finding Nemo, Monsters, Inc., Despicable Me, Inside Out, Shrek, and Minions. So check her out at www.audible.com, where you can listen to May You Live in Interesting Times. Alan Zweibel is an original Saturday Night Live writer. He's won 5 Emmys and 2 Writers Guild of America awards for his work in television, which also includes It's Gary Shandling's Show, which he co-created and produced, The David Letterman Show, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. His theatrical contributions include collaborations with Billy Crystal on the Tony Award play 700 Sundays, Martin Short's Broadway hit Fame Becomes Me, and the off-Broadway play Bunny Bunny, Gilda Radner, which he adapted from his best-selling book. He has written 11 books, including the 2006 Thurber Prize-winning novel, The Other Shulman, and popular children's book of Our Tree Named Steve, and Field Guide to Jewish People that he co-wrote with Dave Barry and Adam Mansbach. Atlantic, he has written his humor in many diverse publications, including The New Yorker, Esquire, The Atlantic Monthly, The New York Times op-ed page, and Mad Magazine. In 2001, which is still streaming on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and other platforms, he and Billy Crystal wrote the movie Here Today, starring Crystal and Tiffany Haddish, which I personally loved. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome both Laraine Newman and Alan Zweibel, and they are here with one of our favorite moderators, Warren Etheredge of the Warren Report and the Film School. Please welcome all 3 of our special guests.
Hello. Alan, I didn't know you wrote for Mad Magazine. And you're muted,
Yeah.
by the way.
What's that?
Okay, now you're not.
No, I did write for Mad Magazine, and the interesting thing about that is I was submitting things to them for years and years. I kept on getting rejection after rejection, and once we got to SNL, okay, once we got to SNL, I resubmitted the stuff that they had rejected. I put it on SNL stationery, and they started accepting it.
Those bastards.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Those foolish, hypocritical people.
So I guess, hello, Warren.
Hello, Lorraine. I think it's your time to shine. It's your moment.
Okay, I am gonna take over here, and I'm saying goodbye to Warren and Alan. And okay, so I'd like to start by saying that I've worn many hats in my lifetime. Some were wonderful, like writer, sketch player, voiceover actor, and mother. Some not so wonderful, like thoroughly beaten and depressed drug addict. All of these hats were worn and taken off and led me to the one that I wear now. Still a mother, still a voiceover actor, and sometimes sketch player and improviser, because that's so lucrative. And book author, something I promised myself I'd do, but never imagined that I'd get done. Honestly, what motivated me was the realization that I'd been on the ground floor and knew many of the people that shaped our pop culture history of the last 50 years. And that's what informed most of the stories that I tell in the book. Now, I grew up in a peculiar town, Los Angeles, California. Peculiar because the town's industry was one that was considered glamorous by people who weren't from there. As natives, we knew it was glamorous, but we also knew that it was a hot, smoggy place with shitty architecture. Still, even the pool/basketball court from my high school was famous, as it was featured in It's a Wonderful Life. My parents were not in show business, but my sister led the way, not only because she was composing music at the age of 16, she also went to school with and later associated with people that became part of the zeitgeist of the 1960s music scene. When she became interested in folk music, we had hootenannies in the backyard with the likes of Theodore Bickel and the Limelighters showing up to play and sing. She and her boyfriend at the time, Barry McGuire, who later had a hit with Eve of Destruction, were invited to be part of the New Christy Minstrels, where they lasted as long as they were able to hide the fact that they couldn't read music. Now, the earliest occupation that I was interested in was paleontologist. I love dinosaurs, but I realized that it was probably an extension of my love of science fiction and horror movies. My brilliant career started when I was 4. I was on Kids Say the Darndest Things with Art Linkletter. It was my first time getting laughs. Sure, I'd gotten them at home, but this was a studio audience, and it sounded like a roar, a wonderful, warm, enveloping roar. I was hooked. From there, I was attracted to all things comedy. My folks had Alan Sherman records, Bill Dana, Shelley Berman, The First Family with Vaughn Meader. The first time I was introduced to the idea of what it could look like to be a funny woman was the incomparable Eve Arden. Our Miss Brooks was a revelation. She was smart and self-possessed and really, was suffering fools on a daily basis. And I loved that. I know most people cite Lucille Ball, but her style of comedy was not my cup of tea. However, Lucille Ball's production company produced Our Miss Brooks and the Ann Sothern show, so she really supported other women. Lucy was also responsible for personally fighting for and greenlighting 2 shows her studio wanted to scrap because they were too expensive, Star Trek and Mission Impossible. So on top of her greatness as a performer, she was an important producer. This abundance of exposure to the things I loved was a much needed antidote to the unbearable loneliness and sadness I experienced as long as I could remember. Through no fault of my parents, and especially my mother, who was ill for the first 4 years of my brothers and my life. Yes, we're twins. I had limited contact with both my parents, something I later learned is essential to building self-esteem and feelings of self-worth. I didn't know the words to describe these awful feelings. I kept telling my dad I was homesick, and he'd laugh and say, "But you're home." I just recently learned a Welsh word that described this feeling perfectly, hiraeth. It means longing for a home that never existed. As I grew, there were many more things that brought me joy. I loved the blues. There was a club called the Ash Grove where I got to see pretty much every blues legend you've ever heard of. At the Whiskey, you could see Little Richard and the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. The Parisian Room had Joe Tex, and I got to see the Beatles twice. Los Angeles was a mecca for any kind of culture you'd want to see. Zero Mostel and a production of Rhinoceros, Rudolf Nureyev and Margot Fonteyn and the Royal Ballet Company, and so much more. Through a series of events involving seeing Marcel Marceau at Royce Hall, I began learning mime and improv at the age of 16. I did that all through high school, along with a theater program. It was great preparation for a career as a performer, and many talented and successful people have come out of our drama department, thanks to a brilliant teacher named John Ingle, who, when he retired, went on to have a great career as an actor. So those who teach also do. After high school, there were stories about auditioning for acting schools in England. So humiliating, but so funny now. Going to France and studying with Marcel Marceau himself, and the many adventures I had in Paris, including my roommate and I posing as French-Canadian journalists and sneaking into a press party at the Olympia to see the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. Back in LA, I didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, what was I going to do with my mime technique? There was a mime on every street corner and it had become cute. And man, do I hate cute. Now, one of the friends I made at Marceau's school was a guy named Albert who wanted to audition for Cal Arts. So he asked me to be his audition buddy. And after we were done, they offered me a spot. But I left the acting program after 3 months. I mean, they wanted me to access my vulnerability and shit. Fuck that. Fortunately, my sister Tracy was involved with something that became a turning point in my life, an improv workshop run by a guy named Gary Austin. This workshop became the Groundlings. If you hadn't heard of our company, just look at the list of SNL performers that come from there. It was such an exciting time in Los Angeles, the precipice of the comedy boom. It's when the Comedy Store opened and where I got to see people like Richard Pryor develop new material. And that's all in the book. There was a very happening scene going on at the diner I ate at every morning, Duke's. So many up and coming people like Martin Scorsese were my table mates. One day, Lorne Michaels and Lily Tomlin came to see a Groundling show for a special Lorne was producing, and I got hired for that and later hired for SNL. My book covers the very beginning of the show, the relationships, the adventures, the laughs, and the not so funny moments, the sudden fame, the jealousy, and my retreat into drugs. I write about battles with the censors and the first threat of a lawsuit, the Claudine Langeais Ski Invitational. If you remember, she was the ex-wife of Andy Williams, who allegedly shot and killed her ski champion lover. We showed footage of spectacular ski wipeouts preceded by gunshot sound effects. I thought it was hilarious, and so did the audience. Anyway, I also talk about the many sketches you couldn't get away with today, or were just in bad taste, like Celebrity Battle of the Sexes and Races. Oh, dear God. I can't even cite for you the parts of that sketch. They're so racist. But best to listen to the book where you can't see me and I can't see you. When SNL was over, I was 28 and so looking forward to coming home to Los Angeles, but I knew full well, having grown up in LA, what it meant to be an out-of-work actor. As tough as I thought it would be, it was so much worse. And I was now having to audition for roles, something I was deathly afraid of because frankly, I knew my limitations as an actress. I had a lot of ill-advised adventures that led me to a moment of clarity that led me to sobriety, which includes a description of rehab. Not quite the movie Snake Pit, but not quite like the Malibu Country Club rehabs either. I'm a nice Jewish girl that met a nice Jewish guy, and we had 2 nice Jewish kids. I diversified in my work and found an art form that inspires me so much: animation voiceover. There's something about the challenge of evoking size and age and nationality, gender, even species with just your voice. And that skill came in handy when I recorded this book. It's Hollywood, rock and roll, comedy, and so much more. Alan, hit it.
Wow. That was one of the most subtle introductions I've ever gotten. Alan hit it. Lorraine, I loved hearing everything that you said. Let me tell about me a little bit. My book, Laugh Lines, My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier. For years, I had been asked to write a book about my career because, not unlike Lorraine's, it covers about 50 years of American comedy. I've been very, very lucky. When this book starts, I'm 21 years old, and I'm now 71, okay? Do the math. I'm a comedy writer. I'm very lucky. I write for TV, I write for Broadway, I write books, I write movies, and I find it also very humbling and ironic because it initially wasn't my idea to become a comedy writer. This was a decision that was made for me about 40 years ago by every law school in the United States. I had gone to the University of Buffalo. My grades were great, but you had to take the law boards, the LSATs, which in those days they graded from 200 to 800. If you can write your name, you got a 200. If you were Einstein, you got an 800. If you were Alan Zweibel, you got a 390, which reclassified me as mineral, like instantly. And I remember going home and telling my Long Island Jewish parents that I had gotten a 390 on the law boards. And about a week later, this is after they uncovered the mirrors, my my father gave me $1,000, which I then took and gave to a man named Stanley Kaplan. For those of you who are not familiar with that name, Stanley Kaplan's got these schools all over the country where he teaches, how to take standardized tests. I wanted to retake the law boards. And for 6 months, I studied. I had #2 pencils. I had earphones. I'm studying with Old Testament, honing my test-taking skills. I retook the law boards, and my score catapulted up to a 401. And so I figured at that rate, I'd be about 90 before I got into an English-speaking law school. So I started writing jokes for the last of the Catskill comics, the guys who were there in the early 70s. In the 50s and the 60s, that was the breeding ground for comedy. That's where Buddy Hackett and Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, and Red Buttons and Toady Fields, Alan King, they all started there. By the time I got there, all those guys had left, and I was writing for every Freddie, Mickey, Morty, Dickie, and Lee that ever lived. They gave me $7 a joke. That was the going rate at the time. You want to hear a $7 joke?
Yes.
First joke that I ever got $7 for. The first joke that made me a professional comedy writer, a guy named Morty Gunty called me up. He was a comedian up in the Catskills.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me that there's a new thing called sperm banks. He asked me to write sperm bank jokes for him. I'm 21, like I cared about sperm banks. So I wrote, they have a new thing now called sperm banks, which is just like a regular bank, except here, after you make a deposit, you lose interest. Okay, so I now have $7. I'm a professional comedy writer. All my friends from college were now in med school, law school, grad school. I moved back in with my parents, and to supplement this great living I'm making as a comedy writer, I took a job in a delicatessen in Queens. You name it, I sliced it for about 2 years, and I continued writing for those guys. And on the strength of my sperm bank jokes, my price went to $10, then $12. The most I ever got for one joke was $18. I got high for a joke I had written about a Hasidic orgy, which was really unusual because the men were on one side of the room and the women were on the other. There was like a feeding frenzy up there for that. I couldn't write for these guys anymore. I used to see them when I was a little kid and our parents would take us to the Catskill Mountains for a holiday weekend. I would sneak into those hotels and see those guys. And now I was writing for them, but it was like writing for my parents' generation. There was a new voice being told in the 70s. There was Carlin, there was Pryor. And like Lorraine said, it was a revolution happening in comedy. And I said to myself, okay, where is the new Catskills? Where is the new breeding ground? There were two places in New York, one called Catch a Rising Star, the other one called The Improvisation. Here was my plan. I took all the jokes these old guys wouldn't buy from me. I typed them up, and my idea was to go on stage and deliver them with the hopes that a manager or an agent would come in, like the material, and want to represent me as a writer. First week I'm there, I meet a guy who's also just starting out. His name is Billy Crystal. He lived about 4 towns over from me, from my parents on Long Island. Every night he would pick me up in his little blue Volkswagen. We would drive into the city, tell our jokes, and on the way home, we would listen to the cassettes and critique each other's sets, you know, the new jokes, maybe if you said it this way, maybe if you said it that way. And I'm in about 4 months into this experiment, okay? And one night I'm on stage, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm having the hardest time in the world making these 4 drunks from Des Moines laugh. I get off the stage, I go to the bar, and now I'm waiting for Billy so he can give me a ride home. And I'm hanging my head, and a guy comes and sits next to me, and he says, you know, you're the worst comedian I've ever seen in my life. I said, thank you. I really need to hear this now. This is good for my esteem. He says, well, your material's not bad. Did you write it? And I said, yeah. He said, well, can I see more of it? I said, you bet. I didn't even ask who this was. At this point, they would have shown it to like a gardener, okay? And it ends up, this is Lorne Michaels. This is April of 1975. He's going from club to club in New York, looking for actors and writers for this new show that would premiere in the fall called Saturday Night Live. I go back to my parents' house and I stay up for 2 days straight at my mom and dad's kitchen table. And I typed up what I believed were 1,100 of my best jokes. Okay, and those typewriters in those days had the keys that went like this. They got snarled, you got ink, it was a whole thing. 2 days later, I had to go into the city for my meeting with Lorne, and I was really nervous. I had never been on an interview before. I had a feeling, you know, I'm working in a delicatessen. I'm writing jokes for Catskill guys. I'm going, wow, young hip show, young hip producer. Oh, I know. I'll dress young, I'll dress hip. I put on my father's maroon polyester leisure suit, okay? I looked like a big blood clot sitting on the Long Island Railroad, going into Manhattan. I go to Lorne's hotel, and I'm waiting to go upstairs for my meeting with him. And I go to a phone. There's a pay phone. It's 1975. There's no cell phones. And I call Billy Crystal. Billy had been having dinners with Lorne. They spent a lot of time together. There was even some talk for a while that Billy would be part of the original cast. That didn't work out. But I said, listen, I have a meeting with this guy, Lorne. Is there anything you can tell me about him that would give me a leg up in this interview? So he says, well, he's written for Woody Allen. He's produced Monty Python specials. Oh, and he hates mimes. Lorne hates mimes. I say, got it. I go upstairs. I sit on the edge of the bed. He pulls up a chair, and I give him this tome with 1,100 jokes in it. He opens it up. He reads the first joke and he goes, very good. Then he closes the book. I'm up for 2 days straight, right? 1,100 jokes. He read one joke. And to show you how long ago this was, from the reference points in it, I had written a joke saying that the post office was going to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp. You want to lick it, it's a quarter, okay? And he said, very good. He said, very good. How much money do you need to live on? So I said, well, I'm making $2.75 an hour at the deli. match it. Okay. So he says, tell me a little bit more about yourself, which I took to mean that before he committed to this kind of cash, he wanted to see what he was buying. I said, well, I really like Woody Allen. I said, I adore Monty Python, but if there's one fucking mime on this show, I am out of here. Give me a job.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest time ever. It's been so long ago, but you know, my dad manufactured jewelry. His place of business was on 52nd Street between 5th and Madison, here in Manhattan. And when I would run errands for him, no matter where the errand had to go, I made sure I went by way of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, because upstairs, Johnny Carson had the Tonight Show. In the mid-60s, there was a show called That Was the Week That Was. There was people in that building doing what I wanted to do someday. And now I'm reporting for my first day of work at that very building. Went to the 17th floor, and I looked around and I saw John Belushi, and I saw Laraine Newman, and I saw Gilda, Dan Aykroyd, and I'm going, I can't compete with these guys. I had never heard of the Groundlings. I had never heard of Second City. And to see Laraine Newman and these other people on their feet, just doing characters and creating little scenes. I was a joke writer. I wrote jokes for Rodney Dangerfield. I had Rodney Dangerfield say, I don't get no respect. Even as an infant, my mother wouldn't breastfeed me. She said she liked me as a friend. Those were the kind of things that I was writing. These guys were creating scenes on their feet. And that's where I really became a fan of the people on the show and became a writer for them. And I've been very lucky since. Like I said, I write movies, Broadway, and books. I'm married to my wife, Robin, who I met on the show. We're married 42 years. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. And to be on the same Zoom and the same sort of thing with Lorraine so many years later, who not only do I love, but I admire. Those of you, you have to listen to her book. This is a real success story. Boy, you'll end up loving her as much as I do. So I'm thrilled to be here with all you folks in Seattle. Warren, it's your turn.
Thank you. You didn't say hit it, but there you go.
Hit it, Warren. God damn it.
Thank you so much. Before we continue on, I just want to praise both of you for the work that you did with these books. I can hold up, I have my copy of Laugh Lines right here. Very nice work, Alan. Not only is it a great review of your life and your comedy and 50 years of funny, but it's also really helpful for anybody out there who wants to write themselves. There's a lot of great advice and wisdom in there, both from yourself and those you work with. Lorraine, thank you so much for your work as well. 9 hours of an audiobook, but that for Seattleites, that's the drive from Ballard to Mercer Island. So that's an easy time and a great.
My hat is off to you.
Thank you. I loved it all. Thank you so much. And normally I've not been a fan of audiobooks, but I enjoyed yours so much because it felt like I was getting a memoir and a show. Not since Jindal did Harry Potter did I enjoy all the voices that came out. Like there's even a little snippet of Fred Armisen. Like you give little impressions here and there that bring the whole story to life. So thank you. It's really wonderful. And I thought you were about to read something from the book, but instead you had crafted something special for tonight. So I appreciate that. But I'm curious, why is there only an audiobook? Why can't I pick it up and hold it in my hands?
Because they're the first people that asked me to dance. I did not want to take I didn't want to make a deal with any kind of publishing place and then have a deadline. That scared me because I'm not really a book writer. It's not a form that I felt confident with. So they approached me, Audible approached me, and that's why. And of course, their business model is Audible. Nothing, it's not a book.
So it's funny that you say you're not a book writer, because if I didn't know, if I didn't know your resumes, I would swear, Lorraine, that you were the writer and Alan was the actor. Uh, you take so much care with how you phrase things and what you put out there. Your memory is impeccable. Like there's just such an attention to detail. And what really struck me about that is that even though you came from an improv background and you were doing live television, it seems to me like you really enjoy like the chance to control things and get your words right. Am I crazy? Are you happier that way?
You're nuts. No,
The hell is he saying?
I was a terrible improviser. I did at the Groundlings, I did what we call down lefts. And I just did character monologues. So those were very controlled, as you say. So your instinct, you are correct, sir.
Thank you for that timely Carson reference there. It's very nice. Because it did strike me, because at one point it seems like you're like panicking during your SNL auditions and you want to get the monologues just right because you had honed them. Can you remember them now? Because you have a great memory. Do you remember?
I remember little bits of it, but I don't know if you recall this from the book, that when I drove cross country to do the show and had everything I had in my car, my costumes and all my written material, and the car was stolen. And then we all were, said, come on up and meet the writers, So Lauren asked me to put up a show for the writers because he was the only person that was familiar with my work. Well, that prospect terrified me. And even though I knew essentially my characters and I knew kind of where these things were going, I hadn't performed them in a whole summer. And I couldn't remember like the connective tissue that led from one beat to the next. And so it wasn't my best foot forward. It was the kind of thing where when I was done, nobody would make eye contact with me, or they would say, it was fine. God, I hate that word fine. Oh, and it's really a tribute to everybody. Alan was so heroic and took one for the team. There was a character I did at the Groundlings, the Swedish cookie lady. And he helped me he wrote it. He wrote the sketch, and I don't know how much I gave him to write it with, but it ended up being pretty good. It was probably better than what I wrote.
It was, I remember you performing that for the writers, and I had never seen anything like it. You were this big lady and you were bouncing around and you had the dialect, and I'm going, all right, let's try that one.
Let's throw that against the wall.
But that was the fun at SNL. Lorraine, if you remember, I don't know if you were in that meeting, but Lauren had said from day one, the only rule we have is let's try to make each other laugh. And if we do, we'll put it on television. And he assured us that there was a generation, a baby boomer generation out there that was not being spoken to comedically. So if we made each other laugh in the offices, it went on television. So it was as casual as that.
Yeah, and it was hard to believe that we really got a chance to do that.
Yeah, when I left in 80, when you did too, and eventually created its Gary Shandling show, there were a couple of writers that we hired on staff who had written for some Gary Marshall shows, and they were very successful. There was one writer who had written for 2 years for Laverne and Shirley and had never met Penny Marshall.
Oh my God.
Now, isn't that astounding?
That is really.
So here where we sat in the rooms together, wrote together, the writers were on stage, say, maybe you do it like this. It was a total collaboration. So there wasn't that hierarchy. There was something, and I thought that's the way TV worked. I didn't know that when you went out in the real world, no, there's like a factory kind of thing that goes on. We were warned about it, but until you experience it, it was, what are you saying,
Alan, I have a question for you because I was struck by something. Like when I heard the two of you were coming together, I assumed that both your books would be littered with references to one another. And Lorraine brings you up all the time. You look like a jock. You get really nice play in Lorraine's book. Lorraine doesn't come up as much in your book, and I wonder, because I know this is so important to you, what college did Lorraine attend?
Lorraine didn't go to college.
Well done. Well played. you passed the Gary Shandling test. I'm sorry. I just had to check. I had to check because I know it's important to you.
No, well, something, when Lauren put this group together, we all had different sensibilities. We all had different backgrounds. You get a guy like Michael O'Donoghue, who came on the show, is one of the original writers. He founded the National Lampoon. I wrote for Catskill Comedians, and Beats wrote for the National Lampoon. Franken and Davis were a struggling comedy team. And he looked for people who didn't have television experience. He didn't want people with bad habits, It
was such a wonderful confluence of tone, just like you say. Where you came from, where O'Donoghue came from, Franken and Davis, like a Minneapolis stand-up team that I actually saw at the Comedy Store before SNL started. I remember them from there. But yeah, I that's so true. What you're saying, Alan, is that none of us had any expectation that we would ever see our content, the tone of our content on TV.
The tone, and what was wonderful, Lorraine, was the different sensibilities, the 1 and 1 equaling 3 of it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Your background is so different from mine. Just listening to you talk about your look, I listened to and I read the transcript of your book, and I'm going, my God, the chances of me meeting with, working with, collaborating with, and staying friends for half a century with this person, what are the odds of it? I think Lorne, in his wisdom, sort of knew that we all had a common denominator. We were all around the same age. All of us were neophytes, but there was something that was, I don't know, revolutionary about the fact that, Woodstock had happened a couple of years before. Nixon had just resigned. There was Watergate. It was our turn. And he put us all together.
That's right. Lorraine, I want to combine a question with one that's come in from a Tracy Newman. Don't know if you're familiar with her, probably just a coincidence. Tracy Newman would like you to do the Swedish cooking lady voice, but I thought maybe you could do that voice in answering. Both you and Alan have a clear shared love for Gilda Radner, and I wondered if you could tell us what made her so special in your mind.
Well, Gilda was my first friend, my very first friend when I got to New York. And I was scared. Let me tell you, I was scared out of my britches. But we had many incredible adventures that are in the book.
Mm-hmm. They are in the book. Alan had a very specific first memory of Gilda. What is yours, Lorraine?
Lauren introduced us. We were the first women cast. And then right away, Gilda just took me under her wing. I mean, really, when I say I was scared, it's taken me years to realize how scared I was to be in New York. It was a completely foreign atmosphere for me. And I was, my impression of New York was like from movies like Midnight Cowboy and Serpico. So this was just,
it's a good look. Yeah.
It was rough. I'm telling you, it was rough. But like the first thing we did is she took me up to a recording of a National Lampoon album. And there I met Bill Murray, Brian Doyle Murray, Harold Ramis, Chris Guest. These were the first people that I met when I came there. And I'm actually on the album. It's called That's Not Funny, That's Sick. And, and Belzer was there too, Richard Belzer. And it was the kind of thing where I was goofing around with them and I got laughs. And it was like getting laughs from these people that I didn't know. And that was so meaningful to me because, as I said, you know, I really was at sea there. But she was so good to me.
I totally hear that. And Alan, it seems like, even though it was like, I think first day, it seems like Gilda threw you a life preserver as well. I've never heard anybody profess their platonic love for another person as much as you do in your book.
Look, Gilda, those were, you know, look, I always think that a platonic friendship, there's usually one person in it who doesn't want it to be platonic.
Clearly.
These are the rules. Okay, I'll live by it now, but one day you'll open your eyes and see the glory of what's in front of you. This lasted for 14 years. We created characters together, but it was platonic throughout. And even when she got sick, you know, her last performance on television was It's Gary Shandling Show. She came on my show, and she was afraid to do it. She hadn't been on TV in 6 or 7 years. She looked different, and it was a live audience, and she wasn't announced beforehand. And I told her, don't be silly. They'll remember you. But she cut me off and she said, you know something, Zweibel, I have to come on your show. My comedy is the only weapon I have against this fucker. That's what she called the cancer, this fucker. She said, will you help me make cancer funny? So she came on the show. And when she entered this unsuspecting audience of 300, it's the most emotional response to this day that I've seen. And when I went to edit that show, you know, sitcoms are usually 3, maybe 4 cameras shooting the same scene from different angles. You go into the editing room and you piece the different angles together like a jigsaw puzzle. You make coherent scenes. The scene of her coming through Gary's door, being greeted by the audience, that angle, the picture was jumping just a little bit and I couldn't figure it out. And then I remember the night we were shooting the show, the guy who was on that camera was crying and his hands were shaking just a little bit. And if you ever see that on some streaming service, look for it. It's not really big, but I left it in as a subtlety, as a tribute. And we thought she was getting better. And, you know, I was married at this point, started having kids, but she was still my platonic lover, you know? And even when she got really sick, I went to Cedars-Sinai to give blood, and I'm lying on the gurney, and nurse comes over with a pad and a pen, and I go, what's this? She says, well, Gilda likes to know whose blood she's getting. Write her something nice. She's having a tough time. So I wrote, Dear Gilda, I knew I'd get some fluid of mine into you one way or another, which I think pretty much summed up things, you know. So it was a different relationship. You know, it was, but not unlike what Lorraine is describing. Gilda was scared of New York, and New York was my city. So I'm sure that she leaned on me for that, okay? But just like Lorraine said, Gilda, if she liked you, you were family, and somehow she had this magical way of emboldening you, of making you think you can do things that you didn't think you can do. She gave you courage and she made you feel good. So my experience was very similar to Lorraine's that way.
So I just want to check with something because it speaks to your perseverance with Gilda, certainly. But you worked with Gilda a lot. You worked with Gary Shandling for 4 years. And one of the things you said that was fascinating to me is that as a writer, you're trying to like find the voice of that person. And at some point you wind up sort of compromising your ego to serve that individual. Can you explain that more, like what that does to you?
Well, you know what it is? If you're writing with somebody for that person, at best, you're vice president. They have to say it. They have to say the words with conviction. They have to say it as if they wrote it. It's as if that's the way they feel. So you take your ego and you put it here. You're servicing somebody. if I write something, if I wrote, let's say for Billy Crystal's Broadway show, if I was really, I felt really passionately about something that I had written. This is just an example. And let's say he didn't like it, didn't want to do it. Then the next thing is, look, Billy, the reason I wrote that joke is because, and then explain why I think that beat has to exist. And if he agrees that the beat has to exist, now let's rewrite the joke as long as we cover that beat, okay? So it's part of the gig. It's part of the gig. Yeah, I'll write stuff that appears on Broadway, and there's a little part of me that wants to run up and down the aisle and go, hey, I wrote that, I wrote that, I wrote that. But at the same time, I like writing so much. I wake up 5:30 every morning. I go to my office here, and it's part of the puzzle. It's part of the puzzle, and it's so much different than it is working on SNL or working on a TV show where there's a gang of people and it's collaborative, where you're in your office and Laraine Newman can come in at 2 o'clock in the morning and go, how about, and you sit and you write something, you know? There was this great, Lorraine, I'm sure is very familiar with, but I don't know, it was this writer, a hero of mine named Herb Gardner, who wrote a Thousand Clowns. And he described a writer's life this way: your days are spent making up things that no one ever said, to be spoken by people who do not exist for an audience that may not come. Okay, that's what it's like to write alone. So if you're in a gang like at SNL, where you have all these different personalities, the alchemy is just fantastic of the different sensibilities.
Don't oversell that career. So there's a question that came in from Jason Morris. I'm curious too, is can the two of you think of a sketch that you worked on together from SNL, obviously?
Well, the Swedish Cookie Lady, but I'm trying to think. I mean,
Didn't you do Elizabeth Ray? Didn't we write that together? That lady who was, oh God, was that her name?
Ask Elvis? Was it?
No, there was a lady who went into a wash basin with a senator and it was a scandal. And then,
You see, Alan, it was 47 years ago,
that's what I mean.
and I don't fucking remember.
You know,
I'm sorry.
I'm sure there were, and I'm sure there were.
Yeah, I wish we could answer that. I just, it's such a long time ago. And I swear to God, you know, I had to look at the old shows to jog my memory about certain things for the book. And it was like, I have no memory of that sketch, you know, and that, so you can well imagine how hard it is to remember this stuff.
Well, you say that, but at the same time, you seem to have an impeccable memory. Like your
I
detail
know what
is
it
pretty
has to
good.
do with me, Warren.
Then, do you feel like your memory improved from 1987 onwards?
Oh, you mean when I got sober? Yeah, because obviously I could be more present
Right.
in my own body. And, you know, the thing is that I never drank alcohol.
Right.
And I think that alcohol is the one thing that makes people not remember stuff.
Right.
And so for better or worse, I remember a lot more than I might have, you know. It's also like, God, why did I do that? You know.
I like that alcohol was where you drew the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Heroin, sure, but
Doesn't
to-
taste good.
funny tobacco somebody puts in your mouth, fine, that's okay. But anything else, not so much. There's another question from Dave Elvin here about, do either of you still watch SNL and think, well, it's pretty good, that guy's got some talent? Or
I
she's
watch
great.
it every week. I
Me
mean,
too.
because I'm 71, I DVR it and I don't get done with it until, let's say, Tuesday. Okay, but I watch it because it's our alma mater, and I don't know that many people who are still there, with the exception of Lorne. but I root for it the way I do my old high school football team. I can't play for it anymore, but I root for them to win. And I think that Lorne comes up with people, whether it's Kenan Thompson or Kate McKinnon, who I think could have been in any cast in any era. I just think that I watch it every week.
I watch it too. I love it. And, you know, a lot of the kids, I watch them develop at the Groundlings. Also, both my kids are in comedy and they're friends with a lot of the people that end up on the show. So, but I love sketch comedy. I'm always going to love sketch comedy. And so absolutely, I still watch it. I still love it.
Wow. I won't make you name favorites from that. Alan, I want to say there's, you sort of confess in your book that there's part of your brain where the memories live, but the emotions may become detached. Have you gotten closer to embracing your emotional life?
Where do I say that?
That's it's in a section where Robin calls you out for not having cried after Gilda's death for 2 years.
Well, that was just
You were serious when you said you hadn't read your book.
no. I had never categorized it as a breach between my emotions and what I was writing. The same thing happened with Gary Shandling. The reason I wrote the book, I didn't want to have one of those memoirs that said, and then I did this, and then I did that. I wanted there to be an emotional through line of some sort. And with Gilda, it was easier, not initially. Yeah, she died, my buddy died, and it was 3 years, you're right, it was 3 years later that my wife, Robin, suggested that I write something about she and I wrote a book called Bunny Bunny, which recounted our relationship. And now they're talking about making a movie out of it. But with Bunny Bunny, it took me 2 years or 3 years to write. With Gilda's death, it was an arc. Somebody has cancer and they die a year later, 2 years later, and as much of a shock and grief as it gives you, it doesn't blindside you. With Gary Shandling, when we were done with our show, we weren't talking. We had all differences of opinion. We were fighting, but there was something about Gary that I wanted in my life. There was a spirituality there. There was a soul that I needed. And we came back to New Jersey where we had our home. The kids went to school in LA, but we came back east for the summers for the kids to go to camp. Robin saw that Gary was appearing at a hotel in Atlantic City. She called him up and she said, I'm bringing Alan down and the two of you are going to go into a room and you're not coming out until you're friends again. And that's what happened. And we broke the ice and we slowly started becoming closer and closer. And I remember it about 3 years ago, I was in LA and I was working on that movie that was mentioned in the intro that I wrote with Billy Crystal called Here Today, that stars him and Tiffany Haddish. Billy and I were working on the script. I was in LA. I called Gary and I said, we were just about there where we were. We were like brothers. I said, let's have dinner. And we couldn't get it together. We just couldn't logistically get it together. I had to fly back to New York. He had another thing. We made up that we were going to talk this coming Thursday night. He died Thursday morning. So that was the thing that tipped the scales book-wise for me, that whereas Gilda, I had done that. There was the catharsis. There was the attempt at closure that's why writers are lucky. We can recount things. We can stick our pens in our hearts and go back to an era and unearth feelings for people, events, and whatever. And with Gary, it was incomplete. And that's what I wrote a chapter and a half about him in the book. So I don't think it was necessarily a breach between emotions and my writing. I think with Gilda, I just think that that as a person, and at that time a father of three, it was easy to put it over there. It was just easy to put it on the side, and I didn't want to confront it until my wife said, you should do this. You haven't cried. I have a question for you, Warren.
Yes, absolutely.
It's what you're wearing around your neck. Now, here's the choice. They're earbuds, and that's your collar, or it's a COVID mask that's sort of down on top of your chin.
I'm actually a defrocked priest.
Oh, so-
I'm just playing it easy right now.
I got you.
We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, because you referenced here today, and in the book, it's sort of a cliffhanger, and I know you have a sort of checkered past with critics. How do you define success for yourself in terms of the work you put out there in the world?
Checkered past with critics. Look, you might be talking about the review that Roger Ebert gave of North, which was a movie that I wrote. And just in case any of you forgot.
Oh, you still have it there.
And what did he say about it, Alan?
Well, Lorraine, listen to this, honey. I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience insulting moment of it. Hated the sensibility that thought anyone would like it. Hated the implied insult to the audience by its belief that anyone would actually be entertained by it. Now, on the surface, this may seem like an unfavorable review, but if you look at it a little closer, you know, I wonder if this is the same with Lorraine. What you remember is the process. You work really hard and you put out the best product you can. You put it out there and it's in the hands of a different God. People accept it, they reject it, there's timing, it's whatever. But I can look at some things that I've done that were not successful, like North. I go, that's when me and Rob Reiner became really good friends. That's when we went to this, or that's when we went to that. And there were other things that I've done that are very successful that I hated going to the studio every day. It's the process that you remember. So the critic thing, I think when you first, after leaving SNL, where there was an anonymity to what you wrote. If you wrote a sketch and it went into the toilet, no one except the people on the show knew about it.
Mhm.
All right. You know, but when that review of North came out, our son Adam was at a private school, Crossroads, out in LA. He was getting, not only was he getting heckled by the other kids, he came home and asked if we can change our last name to Sorkin. Okay, so it was, what you remember is the process.
Okay, that is good advice. Thank you so much for that. And if you get a chance to watch that Siskel Ebert review from 1994, it's a treasure. Now, you may not enjoy it, but it is it's quite something. Lorraine, if I may, Lorraine, you still there? Oh,
Yes, I am.
okay.
Oh, I'll stop.
Okay, just give me 1 second, because I can't close without talking to Lorraine for 1 second. You know, I think you. I'm so glad that I got to listen to this, because I wanted to like follow up with you. I loved you on SNL, obviously, but there's so much I learned about the rest of your life here, and you've done spectacularly. While
Thank
everybody
you.
else went off and made their own movies or something like that, it seems to me personally like you had the most stable, sane life after SNL of any of the original cast members. So I wondered like how. And now you have a daughter who's making waves, two daughters, but one who's really like
Yes.
taking the world by storm in comedy.
Mhm.
How do you define your happiness right now?
Well, you know, I am a Jewish mother, only as happy as my least happy child.
Honest to God, you know, if I've gotten all my work done, there's something good to watch on TV, and I have some good food, I'm happy. I love my work. I love the people that I work with. I love my friends. I love my family, and I feel incredibly lucky.
Well, I think we've all been incredibly lucky, not only here tonight for you both joining us, but also for all the laughs and the work you've shared over the years. Thank you so much, Lorraine. If you have 9 hours and a long car ride, it's the perfect thing to listen to. For those who are a little more old school and want to pick up the book, Laugh Lines is fantastic as well. Thank you, Alan Zweibel. Alan's also got another 10 books beyond that, so you'll never stop reading Alan if you choose not to. All right, thank you both. Pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, all
Thank
of you, for
you.
joining
Thank
us.
you, Warren, for being so thorough. I so appreciate
Yeah,
that.
Warren, you did a great job.
You really
Thank
did.
you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank everyone who's joining us. I'm going to pause the recording in just a moment and we can say goodbyes, but I'm just wondering, Alan and Lorraine, if you have any other last things that you want to leave us with. I put a bunch of stuff in the chat for people to find your books, but are there any last words? I know Warren doesn't like that phrase, but anything that you want to leave us with?
I just want to say my version of what Lorraine just said. How incredibly fortunate we are to not only have these careers, but to have these lives. It's and what Warren said about we survived, Lorraine.
Yes.
We busted through the other side.
Mhm.
We made homes for ourselves and our children, and we found a balance. We
Yeah.
have a balance. We're thriving in both areas. And that's not bravado. It's the God's honest truth. It's not like you only have one and we don't have the other. We have both. And I think we're really, really lucky. And I personally remind myself of that every single day.
Lorraine, did you want to add anything to that?
No, how could I add to anything that Alan Zweibel says? Come on.
Well, I think there's definitely a future for the two of you hosting an upcoming Saturday Night Live. So let us know where we can petition for that. But anyways, I just want to thank everyone. And of course, you know, comedy and COVID, it's been a challenging thing. We do it sometimes logging in. People are starting to get back, but this has been an amazing evening with the both of you. And thank you for sharing your stories and your lives with us. And thank you, Warren, for your great job earlier today on our fundraiser. And thank you for everyone for supporting our events online. Thanks, everyone.
Yay,
Stay safe.
Warren. Yay, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Bye. I'll talk to you soon, Alan.